Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Simon Jockers. I'm not a journalist, at least not by training. I have a background in software development and interaction design, and so for the past 10 or so years, I've worked with design agencies and startups, but also civic tech projects, basically building web applications, digital products. And about 1.5 years ago, I joined Collective. Whoa. So I joined Collective, which is a small journalism nonprofit based in Berlin. So we do quite a bit of crowdsourcing. We also try a couple of new things, and today I want to talk about that, and I'll give a bit of a background or a bit of an overview about crowdsourcing in journalism, and then I will speak about a specific project that we've been running for the past 6 months, and about the learnings that we have from that project. But first, a bit about Collective. So we are around 20 people in a non-profit newsroom in Berlin. Most of us are on this picture. We are mostly journalists, but also a couple of people with a background in technology. And we are a non-profit. That means we don't sell our stories. We publish them for free online on our website. That's collective.org. And we also usually work with bigger media organizations in Germany, but also outside of Germany, to publish bigger investigations so that we reach a bigger audience. We are mostly financed from foundations, but we also got a bit of public money, public funding for educational projects, and we now have about 1,000 paying members of our platform. That is basically people who pay us a bit of money every month to support our work, and prospectively we want to get most of our money from paying members. So in Germany we are mostly known for long-term investigative projects. So we usually don't do daily news. We do long-term investigations in topics that are not so heavily covered otherwise, mostly. One of that investigations is this one into the TTIP trade agreement, or the upcoming trade agreement between the US and the EU. Or another project is this one into superbugs. So superbugs mean bacteria who are resistant to antibiotics, which will be a huge issue in the next couple of years. But we don't just do investigations. We also do quite a bit of educational work. This is actually one of the reasons why we're a non-profit in Germany. And so our work there is mostly around freedom of information and things like data journalism. We, for example, published this ebook on freedom of information rights in Germany, or freedom of information laws in Germany. And we do quite a bit of workshops and meetups. And we also have a fellowship program for young data journalists. So you see that there's a lot of different things that we do, but there are a couple of bigger long-term projects that we run. And one of these projects is a bigger crowdsourcing campaign, so to say. And when we started that, we did quite a bit of research into journalism crowdsourcing, because obviously we haven't invented that, right? So journalism crowdsourcing has been around for about 10 years now, I think. At least for about 10 years, people have been calling it that, crowdsourcing. And because a lot of people call a lot of things crowdsourcing, I want to start with a bit of a definition. that is not a definition I came up with. It's from the Tau Center. They have recently published a really good guide into crowdsourcing that I highly recommend for anyone who wants to get into that topic as a journalist. And they are saying that journalism crowdsourcing is the act of specifically inviting a group of people to participate in a reporting task, such as news gathering, data collection, or analysis, through a targeted open call for input, personal experiences, documents, or other contributions. And so the most important thing here, I think, is that it is about a targeted open call. So crowdsourcing is always about asking your audience for something. So that means that there are also a couple of things that are not crowdsourcing, at least not in the meaning of the word as I use it in this talk. And that would be analyzing content that was generated by users, but for a different purpose than the investigation you are running. That could mean like mining social media or analyzing contributions to Wikipedia or other things where you work with user-generated content, but with user-generated content that you haven't called for, right? You haven't asked for that. And those are also interesting approaches, but this is not what I'm going to talk about today. So, as I said, crowdsourcing always starts with a call to action. And there are a couple of things you can do with crowdsourcing. And this Tau Center guide that I've been talking about, so they defined seven different calls to action, basically, 7 different types of crowdsourcing. And so the first one that is very simple, that is voting. I hope that is, yeah, that's good. So voting is basically asking your audience for opinion on something. So that is usually not super useful for investigative reporting, but there are a couple of things you can do with that. So this is an example from our work at Correctiv. So in the first couple of months when we started out, we asked our members what topics we should investigate in. So we run a little poll, and yeah, this is basically the poll that you see here. A couple of other news organizations have done similar things. Yeah, another thing that is commonly associated with crowdsourcing is capturing what people witness, for example, at breaking news events. That's always sometimes, like, that's what people sometimes call citizen reporting, right? So you have citizens who are in the place of some news event and they report on that. So the picture that you see here is footage from a video from the Boston Marathon attacks, and that is actually an example for a crowdsourcing campaign that went terribly wrong, I think. So basically the day after the attack, people on Reddit started basically a manhunt based on some footage and some eyewitness reports, and that essentially led to the wrong people being accused of being the attackers. But obviously there are a lot of really good examples for doing something like that. Something completely different is this project. It's called the Cicada Tracker. And the backstory to that is that every 17 years, a huge swarm of cicadas, so big bugs basically, hit the US East Coast. And that is like a special natural phenomenon that happens every 17 years. And in order to learn more about that phenomenon, Radiolab, which is a science radio program from WNYC, public broadcaster in New York, they asked their audience to report on cicada sightings. Based on that, they wanted to learn more, basically, about how this event occurs. And they managed to get some data. It's beautifully visualized in this visualization, which is basically a video that shows how the swarm moves across the East Coast. And this is basically just a simple web form where they ask people to enter cicada sightings. And what's interesting is that they also created very cheap and very basic hardware sensors to basically measure cicadas, because they can be heard. So you can actually check for their sound with a sensor, and they use this together with this campaign. So another aspect of crowdsourcing that is very important or very interesting for investigative reporting is asking for people's personal experience with things. Yeah, basically by asking people for personal experiences, you can uncover stories. You can maybe identify new aspects of the topic you're currently working on. And the project that you see here is a web form from the ProPublica's reporting on patient safety in the US. And here they were trying to engage with people who were harmed in hospitals and try to collect their stories. And they did quite some reporting based on stories they got via this form. There's a different thing that is a very similar approach that we currently run in Germany about Unionbusting. So we have a fellow in our newsroom at the moment who investigates how corporates are trying to disrupt worker councils in Germany. And what we did there is also just set up a simple web form where we ask people to submit their stories about union busting in Germany. And this is also just a simple web form where people can enter some data, and then it gets stored in a spreadsheet that reporters in our newsroom can use. So from a technology perspective, this is super simple. You could do that with Google Forms, basically. Very similar thing to do is basically tapping specialized expertise. This is based on the idea that when you investigate a topic, there are usually a lot of people that know more about that topic than you are. So it's about trying to find experts who can help you with your investigation. And a good example for that is ICIJ's offshore leaks investigation into tax havens, the ones preceding the Panama Papers. And what they did here, I think in 2013, is that they asked a lot of local journalists to help them. So they realized that the data they have has a lot of local angles. So what they did is they published the database online and actively asked local journalists to contact them when they find local aspects from the area. And based on that, a lot of people run local stories based on the data they publish. So another thing, and that is what I think is most commonly associated with crowdsourcing in journalism, is completing a task for you. It's basically about free labor. So that is super interesting for the kind of investigative reporting we do a lot at Correctiv, where we wade through a huge amount of publicly available information, or wade through information that is not publicly available yet, but we can make publicly available. And that is very often stuff that you cannot do alone. So you need people to help you with that, and crowdsourcing can be a good tool. Very influential project here is the Guardian's investigation into UK Parliament member expenses. I have a screenshot from it here. It was very hard to find the project. I think it's offline now. I couldn't find it on the Guardian's website. But a lot has been published about that project. So there are a couple of actual scientific studies on how that project went and on the results of that project. So if you're starting out working in crowdsourcing, it makes sense to do some research on this project. And this is also the kind of thing that we're doing with the project I want to talk about later. So we have this project that's called Crowd Newsroom, and that is also a website where we ask people to contribute to a research or to investigation that we're doing at this very moment. But first, a couple of more background. So the things that I said now were basically about free labor. It was about asking people for help with your investigation. But crowdsourcing is about more than that usually. It is about engaging with your audience. With creating a good crowdsourcing campaign, you can make people basically spend more time with your medium, basically spend more time on your website, for example. Ideally, you'll have more returning visitors to your website because people want to keep up with your crowdsourcing campaign and they want to contribute more. And if you have a subscription or a member-based model like we have at Correctiv, ideally you can convert the people contributing to your crowdsourcing campaign at some point to be members or subscribers of your medium. And another aspect that is interesting and so it is possible, I say, that when you run an investigation based on crowdsourcing with a lot of people, that it is easier to have impact on society with your investigation. So if you are working on something in the public interest, like we do with Correctiv, I think there's at least a chance that you have people in politics listen to you. So this is basically the civic aspect of crowdsourcing. So now comes the controversial statement. So the controversial statement here in this talk is that anybody can be a journalist. That is that is a thing people at Correctiv talk a lot about. It's kind of a mantra maybe, and the idea behind that is that not necessarily anybody can do all the work in journalism, and it does not necessarily mean that anybody can be a good journalist, but it means that basically every citizen can do at least some journalistic work. It is just a matter of supplying people with tools, methods, and the right ideas about journalism. So by teaching people about journalism and about journalistic tools and methods, basically by providing access to tools and techniques that you use in your work, you can teach people about journalism and about journalism's role in society, which I think is a really important thing at the moment, because by doing so you can make people aware of investigative journalism basically as a concept, and you can foster support for investigative journalism. So now to the investigation that we're running at the moment. So the investigation we're running at the moment is about the public savings bank system in Germany. So we have a public banking system in Germany. It's called Sparkassen. So public banks in Germany are called Sparkassen. And so this logo that you see here is used by these organizations, and so every child in Germany knows that logo and knows what it means. So the public savings bank system in Germany has a long history, and so I personally think that it's a really good system. So it's a good thing that we have that in Germany. The reason for having it is to have a banking system that provides banking services to anyone, for example, to small people, small businesses, and also to help people save money, to help people get credits for building their house, things like that. And in Germany, this is not one state-controlled thing. It's basically at the moment 409 individual banks with 15,000 branches and 250,000 employees. and they have 50 million customers in Germany. That means basically that in every household in Germany, there's at least one customer, statistically. This makes it a topic that is that we think is very interesting to a lot of people in Germany, and it's also a topic that has not been heavily covered in the media. So there have been like smaller stories every once in a while on misconduct of people in the system, or of some issues that are in the system regarding like interest rates, so things that are more customer focused. But there's never been like a systemic analysis of the system in Germany. And the reason for that is that it's very hard to do, because there are 409 individual legal entities who are who basically publish their own yearly reports, and who have their own sometimes different legal framework in different federal states in Germany. No one has really tackled that. And so we thought it's a good point to start with something that we wanted to try, and we wanted to build a platform for crowdsourcing. For that, we defined a couple of specifications, basically a couple of things that we wanted to do. So we said, okay, we need a very easy data input. So it was clear that the thing we're doing is not just a very simple web form. It's a bit more complicated than that if we want to get a lot of structured data for that investigation. We needed an easy way to upload source documents, because we didn't want this to make this story about people's opinions on the systems. We wanted it to make it a story about facts, about all the data that is in here. So this should be should be a data-driven investigation. What we also wanted is an admin interface for fact-checking, for verifying all the information people put into the system. And we wanted a public interface for browsing the crowdsourced data once it is verified from our side. And then we had like this other part of the application that should teach people about journalism. So we wanted to provide educational resources, which basically means videos and tutorials that we have on a website about basic journalistic tools and techniques, and about things like code of conduct for the people who work with us, and also some background information about the investigation at hand. And by providing that, we wanted to build a community of citizen journalists, basically, that help us with investigations. So not just this specific investigations, but other investigations in a similar vein that we wanted to run in the future. For that, we built a web application that is not like from a web technologies perspective or from a web developer's perspective. It's not a super complex application. It's basically a website where you can input data. It goes into a certain data model stored in a database, and then you can verify and publish some data in the database later. So we were basically two developers, two technologists in our newsroom working on that. And we worked closely together with one journalist who ran that project from a journalism perspective, basically. And so the page that you see here is the homepage. It has some background about the investigation, and the homepage was supposed to make people want to learn more about the project, and then get into the educational resources and maybe get into the actual investigation. So educational resources here are basically a set of videos on freedom of information and press laws and other things in Germany, and together with that also some online tutorials people can click through. And then we have basically a wizard kind of web interface. So it's basically a set of 3 or 4 forms that people go through when entering data. So I was afraid that I have problems with internet access here, so what I did is I created a video. See if this works. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so starting out on the homepage. Doesn't work right. Ah, it does. Okay, I can see it. So people, yeah, this is bad. Yeah, it's a bit annoying because I can't see the video on my screen. So basically, people scroll through a list of questions. They select a question to answer. In this case, it's about. Shit. Okay. In this case, it's about the salary of people working in the management of one of the banks. So what you already saw is logging in to the platform with Twitter, because we wanted to have at least some way of verifying who people are. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's enough to do the job. And then people basically log in, look at source documents that are already there that could answer the question. Then open, basically select the source document, open it, scroll through it, find the information they are looking for, which can be a bit of a tedious talk. You see how a yearly report of a public bank in Germany looks like. And once people find the information they need, they can basically take it from there and enter it in a form. If the source document they need for that is not there, they can also upload it themselves. Because we wanted it as easy as possible for people, we scraped a lot of data from a public source in Germany, where all the yearly reports are published, and then basically uploaded that so that people had an easy way of accessing it. So here you see the actual inputting of the data. So here I select the name of a board member of a public bank in Germany, and then specify basically the year or the time range for that the yearly report is that I'm looking at. In this case, it's a year, but sometimes it's not a full year when someone like leaves the board before the year's over, for example. And then I select the position. And then I can enter the money the people received from the bank for a certain year in that case. So I go back to the source document. There I find the actual information in a table. I take the information from there. And I put it in the web form. Yeah, from there, I go to a screen where I can get an overview of the data I've put in, can double check it, and then save it. And the data goes into our admin interface, where someone on our side can verify the data. And once it's verified, it's published for everyone to see online. And that was a very, very basic question, but we have more complex questions that require a bit of more research, and that also require to add your own source documents. For example, there are certain informations that are not available online, and for those information that are not available online, people actually have to go to their bank. So they have to go to the physical branch of the bank, use their mobile to snap a picture of the document, and then they can use that picture as a source document by uploading it to our platform. So what you saw now is basically, it's a prototype for the thing, right? It works, it does the thing, but it's not very beautiful. It's basically does the job. It's just what we got done with 2 people in a couple of weeks' work. But for now, it's fine for the investigation we're running. And yeah, this is basically the platform. This is what we built, and now comes the interesting part. And there's a question now, if you run a crowdsourcing campaign and you build a platform for it, what happens next, right? So this is a picture of Kevin Costner in a great movie called The Field of Dreams. And in The Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner is a farmer he's a bit troubled, I think, mentally, and he has this dream that he should build a baseball field on his farm. So he sets out building a baseball field because he strongly believes that once he builds it, they will come. And actually, he builds a baseball field, and all the dead baseball legends, they come and play on his field, on his farm. So that's how it works in Hollywood, obviously, but that's not necessarily how it works in investigative journalism, right? So just because you build something doesn't mean that people will just come and help you with your investigation. So there are basically four things, right? So when you want to run a crowdsourcing campaign for your investigation, you need to investigate in the open. So it's important that you do it in the open because you need everybody to know about it, right? If you can't tell people about your investigation, you can't crowdsource it. And to get it out to people, you need to publish about the topic. So you need to make it known that you work with this topic. People need to know about you. Thing is that if you don't have reach, so if you can't reach a lot of people because you're not a big organization, you need someone with reach to help you. And you obviously have to use social media a lot. You have to communicate with your audience and keep them posted about what you're doing and about what's happening next. And so what we did is we published a couple of stories on the topic of the public banking system in Germany that were not associated with the crowdsourcing campaign. So this was basically right before we started the crowdsourcing campaign. We had a couple of smaller stories about local misconduct and about general transparency issues in the public banking system lined up, and we published them. And what we also did is we found a partner for publishing those stories who worked with us. That was Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, FAZ in Germany. It's a very conservative, but still, I think, regarding certain topics, very important newspaper in Germany. And so the interesting thing about this was that this is a conservative newspaper that agreed to work with us, which is not necessarily the newspaper we usually work with. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make this story appeal to another audience also. So we wanted to get the people who are interested in the banking system in Germany involved. And I think that worked quite well. So we got we had quite some stories on the FAZ website and also in their print edition, and we could make them agree to publishing basically a simple form as part of their articles on their website that brought people directly to our crowdsourcing platform. So what people could do is they could use this search form inside the article to enter the name of their city or their postcode to find some information about their local bank, and then start out adding more information about their local bank. And I think without doing so, we wouldn't have the success we had. So once we started out, we had pretty soon had a couple of hundred people on the platform. That doesn't necessarily mean that we had 400 people who heavily contributed. It means that we had like 400 people who signed up and maybe entered a single set of data, and then we had like a smaller amount of people who were really heavy users of the platform. And for example, we had one person who entered a lot of information about all the banks in Bavaria. So you can, by doing something like that, you sometimes find people who are really passionate about the topic, and will put a lot of effort in to help you. And another thing we learned is that you can find by doing so you can find people who give you inside information, because when people see that you do a lot around this topic and they agree with your reporting or your positions on transparency, they will basically at some point maybe leak data or maybe contact you about stories that you wouldn't find out about otherwise. Yeah, and another thing we did is that we used a lot of social media, as I said before. So we posted a lot on Facebook and Twitter about the progress in the investigation, and we also asked people specific questions on Facebook and Twitter to get people to answer certain questions we had. So the whole system is basically based on questions. We ask a question, people answer it. So simple as that, basically. And what you see on screen now is a video interview that my coworker Jonathan did with one of the contributors to the campaign. This woman, Cinderella Glücklich, is one of our readers, and she contributed quite a bit to our research. And we contacted her and met her at a workshop we run, where we run a physical workshop to get people involved, and we then decided to basically make a video interview with her to learn about how she uses the platform and why it's interesting for her. And yeah, we did a couple of more things like that just to get people engaged with the platform. So yeah, a couple of things that we've learned now. So we're now 6 months into the investigation. And important thing that we noticed pretty early on is that we lacked focus. So it's very important not to do too many different things at the same time. We initially had the plan, or we initially wanted to get all the data about the whole public banking system in Germany. Turns out that's not so easy, right? Because we had there are 409 banks. We had, I think, 24 questions about every single bank, so that makes a lot of questions. And when you want to present information in a way where you present systemical issues, then you need all the data, right? Or at least almost all the data. While we had all the data on certain banks, we didn't have all the data on all the banks, or at least not even all questions, and there weren't even some questions that were answered for all the banks. So what we did is we selected a relatively simple question and tried to put more focus on this question and try to make people answer this specific question. And what we did is we published a list of banks that we were still lacking data for a specific question, and also published a story why transparency about this specific topic is very important. And by doing so, we could, I think, increase the number of banks we had the information for this specific question for to around 400. So we had almost all the data, and then we could publish something on that specific question. And yeah, we did that on Twitter. We also use Facebook with the same thing. Basically, we have both lines of communication for doing that. And what we also did is we tried to get other news organizations, other blogs write about our campaign. So this is Finanztipp. That's a consumer-focused blog or website about financial products, basically. And we basically interviewed them about the topic and published that on our website. And in turn, they wrote about our investigation on their website, and that also drove new traffic to our website of people who would otherwise not be interested in the topic. Then a thing that is closely related to that is that community building is really hard and it's a lot of work. We had the reporter working on that topic for some time almost, just doing community building and community management, staying in contact with people via Twitter and Facebook, talking to officials from the banking system, and trying to get like all of this together. And it turned out that it's not so easy to get people interested in the topic, or it was relatively easy to get people interested in the topic, but it was not so easy to keep them interested in the topic. So public banking is rather, it's rather boring, right? So it was not so easy to make the whole process of finding out the information and entering the data fun. So we focused on making it easy, but we didn't necessarily succeed in making it fun. So while we had a couple of people who were really interested in the topic, enter a lot of data, other people just tried it once, put in some data, and then left and never came back. We also tried to establish like a forum, like an online community of people where people discuss certain questions around our investigation, and that didn't work out at all. We're still trying to figure out how to better manage that, but I think the key here is also that you need someone who's in charge of running that, and we didn't have the person in our newsroom because the reporter working on that topic basically had to do reporting, right? So he couldn't do like community management all of the time. Yeah, so we're still figuring out how to best do that. Another thing is verification. We started out and wanted to verify all the data that was put in. And I still think that it's really important to do that. So you have other people say that verification for crowdsourcing projects is not so much of an issue. If you have enough people who enter the data, you can like basically compare data people enter, and you won't have a problem with errors, and you won't have so much of a problem with people who enter stuff that is basically untrue to the database. And while we didn't have much of an issue with data that was false, like data that was voluntarily entered that was false, we had some issues with people like leaving out, like people getting decimals wrong or something. So you can't, like, if someone enters data about the salary of the director of a bank and it's 2 million instead of 200,000 euros, that's a big issue, right? And in order to fix that, we verified all the data, and there were times where we had basically 2 interns just verifying data all of the time for days, weeks on end. And I think for the future we'll try to set up a system where people, like members of the community or contributors to the crowdsourcing campaign, verify the data other people have entered. So basically crowdsourcing the verification for the crowdsourcing campaign. I think that's the only, essentially the only way you can handle that with that amount of data. That being said, it's very important to make clear that like verifying data is not as, doesn't take as much time as entering the data yourself. So our publishing partner, the FAZ, they said at some point, so why are you doing all of that? Just like we bring in 2 reporters and they will enter all the data. But it doesn't work like that. So it's not so easy. It's a lot of data, and it's easy to verify it once you know, okay, this piece of data is in this document and it's on page X, and then it's easy to verify it. Also, we wanted to engage with people because this was one of the reasons to run the crowdsourcing campaign. We didn't just like hit the investigation with like 10 journalists who then run it. And yeah, so the last thing is when you investigate a topic like that in the open, you obviously need a lot of courage to actually proceed that and stick to the things that you stated, because we gotta, if you deal with 409 single legal entities, you also deal with 409 PR and marketing departments, right? So there are a lot of people who try to push different or bad opinions on your research into other press media. And we had quite some, or we had a couple of articles in other media where people heavily criticized the crowdsourcing campaign we're running, saying that we're basically running a smear campaign, that we try to put the public banking system in Germany into a bad light, which is not what we wanted to do. So we wanted to basically pressure them a bit to force them to more transparency, and we also wanted to find issues that are in the system, but we never had the problem. We never had the intention to I don't know, destroy the public banking system in Germany, which we didn't do, by the way. So it's a very strong system with a lot of people backing it. Also, a lot of people apparently say that crowdsourcing journalism is not real journalism, right? It's just real journalism if you sit down and do all the investigative work yourself, which I think, yeah, doesn't make much sense, right? So this is not I don't know, figuring out the data, entering the data in a database. This is part of the journalistic process, but it's not the investigative work itself, right? It's just using the tool. It's just not necessarily running the investigation. So yeah, this is basically it. I think we have about 5 minutes for questions and discussion. So are there any questions? Okay, I think there's a question in the back.
Hi. Could you talk to us a little bit more about your verification process? So you talked about verifying numbers. What else did you do, or how did you approach the information that was put in?
Yeah, so verification was relatively simple. So basically, we had a simple interface where a researcher on our side basically saw the data that got entered. They basically looked at the data. There was a link to the source document, so they opened the source document. While doing all the verification, they had learned a lot about how these documents are structured. They were all a little bit different, but once you know what you're looking for, once you have the document at hand, you open it, it's pretty easy to find the data, and then they basically check the data, click the verification button, and once it was verified, it was also publicly available. So basically, once data was entered into the platform, it was only visible for people who are signed up for the platform. So once you log in for the platform, you see all the data entered, but the data that is not verified yet is marked as not being verified on our side. And once it gets verified, it gets marked as verified basically in the internal area of the crowdsourcing platform, and it gets also published to the public part of the crowdsourcing platform. What we didn't do so far is basically double check if the source documents people upload have been tampered with. So that is a process that is harder to do. I mean, this is a process that you can automate to a certain point, like checking PDFs if they have been manipulated and stuff like that. You can actually do that, and we thought about it, but so far, most of the source documents that are used on the platform, so most of the more complex source documents, like yearly reports, have been uploaded by us. So we know that they are true. We know that they are correct because we scrape them from the government ourselves. And the other source documents, we don't automatically check. And so far we haven't had any issues with people uploading source documents that have been manipulated. Okay, more questions?
Wait. The system you organized, or the results you got out of it?
So the question was about if I am personally more proud of the system or proud of the investigation. And I think I personally, I have to say, I built the system. I didn't run the investigation, right? So I'm very proud of the system, even though it has a lot of technical issues still, and it's more of a prototype of the system I actually wanted to build. But I think generally the software we build or the platform we build is not that spectacular from a technologist's point of view. It's a simple web application. I've built dozens of that before. I think the interesting part here is all the engagement with the audience here.
And the results? What are the main results you journalistically speaking? What was the news?
Here, okay, yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, so far we're 6 months into the story. We ran a couple of stories that are more customer focused about interest rates at certain banks, because there are huge differences in the interest rates for credits you get at the different public banks. So it's not unified. Every bank has their own thing. And that was quite a big story in Germany. That was also picked up by a couple of other news, like major news outlets in Germany. And then at the moment, we have a data journalism fellow at our office who looks into other more systemic problems with salary of people. But this is not something I can talk about and not something we have published about yet. So it has actually been not, so there have been quite some results regarding more customer-facing things or customer-focused things, but not necessarily like the big wrongdoing by people in the system, for example. But I'm pretty sure we'll find that. Okay, I think we have like 2 or 3 more minutes. Are there more questions?
Good evening. I would like to know about the teaching issue. So, which is your system to teach the right techniques and right ideas about journalism to the citizen? And I also would like to know if this system is referred to just German citizens or Europe. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah, about the teaching system. So you said that you also teach people how to make some research, the right techniques, the right methodology to find out data and this type of things. I mean, that you refer to video tutorials. Do you have a system, like a specific agenda to how to teach to people in your site?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So with regards to the teaching materials, that is also in a very early stage. So what we've done so far is we have basically 3 areas or 3 fields we wanted to teach people about. So the first field is like I think journalism basics. So it's about like what's a journalist anyway, right? What does a journalist do? What are the rules people obey to when they do journalistic work? So that is like the first part. The second part is more about freedom of information in Germany, because this is here people deal with public bodies, so they can ask all sorts of questions, and they can also get all sorts of documents from this legal entities, because they are legally obliged to publish them, but they sometimes don't. So we wanted to teach people about this, so freedom of information basically. And then the third area is specific to the public banking system. So the third part is more like more practical about the investigation, like explaining people what data banks publish in a yearly report, explaining how to read a yearly report, and also explaining some background about how the public banking system works in general and what the purpose of it is. And regarding the second question, so at the moment, so we've built the system as a platform we can run multiple investigations on. It's not just for this specific investigation, but at the moment we just run one investigation. That is the specific one I've talked about now. And We're currently talking with partners inside of Germany, but also with partners outside of Germany to figure out what to tackle next. But I'm pretty sure that the next story that we run is also a German one, and also regarding like infrastructure in Germany. Because I think this multi-local stories where you have a lot of local data points to collect, they work pretty well with a system like that. We want to make the system, like the application we built, we want to make that open source at some point in the future. But at the moment, I think we're far away from doing so. So we're just 2 people working on that, and it has a lot of very rough edges. So it's not something that you can just like hand over to someone else and they will run their investigation on it. All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot. There on the slide, there's my Twitter handle. I'm also around for the next session. So if you want to talk to me after the session, just hang out and come over and talk to me. Thanks.